Okay. Um, well, thank you, Eduardo, for presenting today on your topic about enhancing organizational interoperability and Hyperledger Cacti. Uh, um, this is streaming to YouTube and also available after the fact. So if anybody has any questions for you in the future, it would be helpful if you point people to, where to find the Cacti channels on Discord. So please, if you're watching this after the fact and you have questions about anything that Eduardo is going to share, please join us on our community channels. And with that, Eduardo, why don't you take it away?
Yeah. So, well, welcome everyone. I would like to start with a brief introduction of myself. So, my name is Eduardo. Right now, I'm working as a smart contract developer at scale. Um, sorry. I've quite recently graduated from Instituto Superior Técnico in Lisbon as a Master of Computer Science and Engineering. So, first part of 2024, I took on the challenge of entering the Web3 world and starting the investigation on blockchain interoperability. So it was a topic that I had basically no practical knowledge about. And so I integrated the blockchain interoperability team at Inesc, dedicated to the blockchain.pt project. And during the second half of 2024, I took on the extra challenge of improving Cacti's organizational interoperability capabilities, and so took part on the Linux Foundation mentorship program. Okay, so let's move on. So today we'll go over what was done during the project and the internship. So I'll start with some context and background about interoperability in blockchain, Cacti, and this project in concrete. The goal is to first show you why this project is relevant, not only for Cacti, but also for blockchain interoperability in general. So we'll then move on to the actual process. So where I'll resume the work that took place during the 6-month internship, and we'll go over the whole thought process, deliverables, etc. And finally, we'll conclude with some, final thoughts, future work ideas, conclusions, and obviously some room for discussion and questions for whoever is watching live. So about blockchain interoperability, we know that Web3's popularity is, in exponential growth. We hear it's all over, people mentioning Bitcoin, US strategic reserves, etc. And the market is currently overflowing with new projects, these solutions. So nonetheless, technology is quite recent, and thus the ecosystem grows the need to link all these systems in a seamless and standardized way. We thus have, interoperability efforts entering the scene. There are currently lots of projects trying to address this issue. Examples include Cosmos, Wormhole, Chainlink, and many others. The major things that these solutions have in common is that most of them were developed having public blockchains or specific ecosystems in mind. Let's say, for example, IBC is great in Cosmos, but other blockchains sometimes require internal protocol modifications to implement it, etc. Wormhole is widely known, but designed specifically for certain blockchains also. And like these, there are many other projects, Chainlink, XLR, Layer Zero, and many others. And some of them have also heard to be associated with major hacks in the past few years. And this makes sense, since the value right now resides mostly in public ecosystems, and thus demand and investments in these ecosystems is also bigger. So in the midst of all of this, we have Cacti. And Cacti, it's great. It's an interoperability framework designed to accommodate different blockchain interoperability solutions and the modularity it offers by enabling one to create business logic plugins with custom logic and using, the already created plugin connectors. It offers great basis for development of projects and, many, many different use cases. So with Cacti, we have these, Cacti nodes, and we can plug it in any custom logic that we need using business logic plugins. So the only requirement is, the logic needs to be developed. These plugins need to be developed. So, which brings us to the question: what exactly do we have in Cacti? So it would be impractical to build everything from scratch every time we need an interoperability solution. And so in Cacti, I would say the most widely known plugins are plugin connectors. These plugins basically create a layer of abstraction on top of the LTs and their internal tech stack, and extending, known libraries like Web3.js and others. And so typically, an interoperability solution in Cacti should include these in their design. So that extending the solution to multiple blockchains would be, almost as simple as developing new plugins that allow main components communicate between any two blockchains. And Cacti these days has a great interoperability solution called SATP. Keeps going. We have all these plugins either developed or active development, but these target mostly semantic and technical layers of interoperability. So, I mean, sure, we can transfer an asset from one blockchain to another already, but when we zoom out and think big and imagine interoperability beyond, one Cacti node that realizes this, it's where, everything gets really, really interesting. And so we want a Cacti to be able to bring together multiple organizations with different requirements, standards, regulatory frameworks, etc., and start imagining things like networks of Cacti nodes owned by different organizations, connected to different distributed ledgers, and yet able to join in this cooperative environment. And this concept was already present in Cacti, and we called it a consortium of nodes. So Cacti structures a consortium of nodes in the following way. We basically have a consortium, right, which is composed of consortium entities, which basically represent the different organizations, like real-world entities that are part of the consortium. And then these entities own consortium nodes, which has basically are operational Cacti nodes that possess some logic to interact with certain ledgers. And before, these projects, the plugin that was developed in Cacti to handle this was named Consortium Manual, and it allowed to construct this network of nodes, but had some limitations. The first limitation is that the network was fixed, so it had to be manually set up upon creation of the Cacti nodes, and changing it would imply full redefinition of it. And its main feature was that it allowed to redirect, user requests to the right Cacti node. So let's imagine I wanted to transact with ledger A, but for some reason I sent a request to a node that doesn't transact to ledger A. This node was able to redirect me to one node in the network that actually does transact to ledger A, and this was useful, but it was the only thing that the plugin allowed us to do. And so with all of this, context in mind, the projects aim to, first of all, add value to this concept of consortia in Cacti. Furthermore, we wanted to provide some way to manage and creating consortiums of nodes in a less strict, manual, and maybe a more dynamic way. So organizations evolve, requirements change, networks should have some level of adaptability. And it's worth mentioning that all of this was very abstract, so there was no actual, strict plan of how to achieve all of these goals. So besides actual implementation of one of the main contributions of this project is to give, the first step, explore options, document research, and on different solutions. And next, after these first steps were concluded, we wanted to integrate the improvements in a real-world use case and practical scenario. Therefore, the plan was to integrate all of these with SATP. Help also in the first layer of SATP's protocol, that is about context establishment, and is related to also organizational interoperability. And finally creates like a demo of all of these components put together to showcase their use. So as I mentioned, the project was very open-ended and oriented for research. So first month, maybe a couple of months was spent doing on research and exploring different options. At this point, there were mainly two things that we were focusing on. The first one would be to introduce something like policies in Cacti. The how is mostly unclear, but the general idea was to allow representation of legal, informational, operational, technical policies in Cacti as objects instead of simply having things configured in each plugin in a certain way. So protocols, have subprotocols, different entities have different regulatory frameworks and requirements. And the first step was thus to allow the representation of these objects, these policies in Cacti. The second objective was to create a way to communicate these policies between nodes. So this one here was a bit more trickier as it involved creating some form of peer-to-peer connection communication between Cacti nodes, which doesn't natively exist. During research, we found a lot of options, even including some voting consensus mechanisms, and eventually this path about how to communicate policies was kind of postponed and set aside of the scope, or at least not with this level of complexity. So almost like 2 months into the mentorship, I proposed the following solution to address some of the goals of the project. It involved creating a new plugin to extend the functionality of the plugin that I mentioned before, Consortium Manual. The plugin had two new main features. The first was that it extends Cacti's base definition of consortia by adding to it a shared document that includes policies. This model was inspired in a modular framework proposed by the Internet Engineering Task Force, actually, that we will see in more detail on the next slides. And the second improvement envisions to break the manual setup of consortium and allow for the network to expand in size. So we would, network is set up and eventually we allow to something like this to happen. So we add a new nodes, we remove nodes, etc., etc. So these improvements finally brought some extra value to the consortium construction with this general purpose model for defining policies. And we also create the possibility of the network to evolve at runtime without the need for restart and reset of everything each time we need, a change. So as I mentioned, the model was inspired in a modular framework proposed by the Internet Engineering Task Force called the Policy Core Information Model. It basically includes these main elements, most of them abstract. So everything is a policy abstract component. And then we have policy items. Policy rules implement these policy items. Policy rules includes policy conditions and policy items. So policy rules include policy conditions and policy actions. So a policy rule has a condition, and if this condition meets somehow, it will trigger some action. And then we have policy groups that help us, gather together these policy rules. These policy groups could also have subgroups that include more policy rules, etc., etc., etc. And the second improvement that envisioned to break the manual setup of consortia and expand the network in size. Well, once again, we wanted to keep it simple. So I designed this simple workflow to add new nodes to consortium. So on setup, now we don't need to define all nodes and ledgers that are part of the consortium right upon creation. So instead, we only need to define which entities are part of this consortium. And obviously, there must be at least one starting node. And so I will summarize this process that we have an image here. And at the end, if someone has any questions or wants to discuss it in more detail, we can do that. So firstly, a new node must have, a signed assertion that it belongs to one of the entities in the consortium. With this assertion, it sends a request to any node that is already in the consortium to join. And this request includes the assertion that I mentioned, and also an extra value that includes proof that the node knows about the consortium policies. And for this, we used Merkle trees for verification of all the policy tree. And the node that receives this request makes a first validation process. And after validation completes, it broadcasts the request to the other nodes, who also validate the request on their ends and update their consortium information with the new node. In case this succeeds, the new node receives information about the consortium and also updates his knowledge and is now part of the network. So instead of focusing on enforcement decision points for policies, we mostly require nodes to share these signed assertions as they have knowledge of consortium policies, and then we can use these for future disputes in case of misbehaviors, much like we used claims in the secure asset transfer protocol. And the plugin was developed during the next 2 months of mentorship. So after some back and forth on pull requests, reviews, discussion, etc. And it is now available in the main repository of Cacti. So for anyone who wishes to check it out, test it, and also plug it in, to any of their use cases, you can do that. Okay. So after the merger of this new plugin, and given the time left that we had, roughly 2 months, so we shift focus to the next stage, which included integrating everything with the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, which is a plugin in Cacti, to create this interoperability mechanism with a new plugin, our consortium plugin. So the mechanism had several requirements, such as it had to be capable of realizing atomic transfers using the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol. It should, somehow enhance traceability, transparency, and accountability of cross-chain transactions using this plugin Bungee that I also developed outside the scope of the mentorship. And the mechanism is not only extensible to transact between any blockchain, provided the necessary plugin connectors, but also capable of being part of a network of gateways, given the new consortium plugin. So this paves the way to breaking the silos of isolated one-to-one interoperability solutions and integrations, and allows for organizations to cooperate under a well-defined, policy model. So during this next phase, we had the requirement to have the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol up and running. So I know first month of these last 2 months was spent improving SATP, integrating Bungee into SATP, and helping on the finalization of the plugin, which breached tokens, between TLTs. And this included the implementation of the external API of the Secure Asset Transfer plugin, so that the breach could receive requests from users to trigger cross-chain transactions. We also included a proof of concept implementation of the stage 0 of the protocol. And, in a way, this was out of the scope of the project. I will leave it for discussion later if anyone wants to discuss the protocol in more details. But essentially, we created a 2-step mock implementation of stage 0 in Cacti to get things going. And for reference, Bungee basically allows us to create what we call blockchain views, which are basically snapshots of blockchain states that include transactions, also developed by me during the master thesis. Almost at the end of the mentorship, to showcase functionality of the mechanism, we created the following use case. So in this imaginatory scenario, we would have 2 different organizations, let's say 2 central banks from different countries. Their goal is to exchange digital currency, so without compromising the integrity and security of each network. So a user on blockchain 1 may want to transfer some money to another cryptocurrency and needs a way to transact from blockchain 1 to blockchain 2 safely. In this case, both central banks would self-host a gateway, one of those interoperability mechanisms that we've seen before. and form a consortium with these two gateways. The gateways represent exactly, the mechanism as seen above, and then would be able to transact assets freely. So to create this, we picked up an old version of a use case already present in Cacti, which was the CBDC app. As it used, an older version of SATP, it required major refactoring and testing to accommodate the new functionality. But it was done, and I don't know if anyone here actually I've seen the previous version, but it's pretty different. So I bring to you today, a quick demo of the functionality. So we basically have some tokens in Hyperledger Fabric at this point. So we first need to give approval to the bridge to transfer a certain amount of tokens. The transaction is sent to the blockchain. And now the bridge, so we can trigger a request to the bridge to bridge tokens to the other network. In this case, we will transfer to Alice the amounts specified before. And SETP runs under the hoods, and the tokens will be available on the destination chain. We can see the status of the transfer, etc. So it's a really simple interface to showcase everything running, and we could do the same thing backwards. So approve some tokens.
Hey, are
And
you
in this case,
sharing anything? Any screen?
is the video not visible?
All I see is your face, your picture. Other than that,
I'm
your
seeing something
video.
that says demo and approve funds to bridge.
Okay. I'm not able to see. That's why I'm wondering. Thank you.
Okay, in this case, we transferred the tokens to Charlie on the same chain, and now we will give some approval to the bridge again to transfer 10 tokens from Charlie. In this case, we'll trigger a transfer to Alice of these 10 tokens. And once again, SETP runs under the hoods, and the tokens will be available for Alice on the Hyperledger Fabric chain. So wrapping up, all the work that took place during the project, we achieved most of the main goals of the project. So we had valid consortium in Cacti, mainly using introducing the policy model in Cacti in the new plugin. We automated consortium management and creation, so created some process to allow new nodes to join consortium network. And we also contributed to literature, mainly through the publishment of my master's thesis, which included in fine details all of the contents of this work and many more things in particular. I would say that we only halfway fully integrated this with the secure asset transfer protocol. In fact, the protocol has an orchestration layer that I believe has a lot of room for improvements, and so a lot can be done in this area. So I would take that as halfway complete. We defined a simple prototype for stage 0 in the secure asset transfer protocol, and we successfully created the use case to showcase all of this functionality. And so deliverables, we had the new Cacti consortium plugin. This was, roughly, I would say like 4,000 or 5,000 code lines in Cacti main repository is publicly available. We integrated Bungie into SETP and made several improvements in the secure asset transfer protocol, which is also publicly available. We created the use case app so this app is also publicly available. Everyone can test it, run it on their local machines. And finally, about documentation and etc., I published this master's thesis on blockchain interoperability. I can probably then give out and send the links for anyone who wants to check any more details about the work. As a future work, if there's anything and something that I learned from the experience is that there is really a lot to be done. There is a lot of room for improvements, and interoperability is a major issue with many interesting different branches. So, as you know, first proposal, I would propose more field testing, mainly regarding policies and the creation of thoughtful and structured policy trees that would represent real world scenarios. One of the ideas was actually to ship this policy model as a common property of the base definition of a consortium Cacti. So every other plugin would have access to it without depending on the new one. So because right now it's only included inside the new plugin package. And depending a little bit on the first recommendation, it'd be interesting to study how to inject these policies into plugins, have plugins using them and or enforcing them for any purpose. Optionally define frameworks for allowing for tracing operations, etc. And as a final thought, I still think second research direction, which was about peer-to-peer communication of policies, etc. So Cacti nodes do not have, a native way to communicate peer-to-peer. So unless it is implemented using a custom plugin, such as the suggested transfer protocol. And so I believe there's room for improvement there. I recall some versions were actually being developed by one of my mentors, but in reality, they never really got out there. And finally, I would like to extend huge gratitude, firstly to my mentors, Peter, Andre, and Rafael. It was super interesting. I learned a lot. I also would like to thank my team at INES and professors from Instituto Superior Técnico, and also all of you for joining, for being present. And now maybe I don't know how many we are here, but if we have any questions or about the presentations, any specifics that curiosities about mentorship or anything like that. My idea was to have a final room for discussion.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to type in the Zoom chat or use the raise hand feature or just come off mute.
If not, I'm not sure, David. Maybe I don't have anything else to share.
Hi, Eduardo. This is Sue. I just have a
Yeah.
question. When you try to implement the Cacti, right? What are the client challenges which you faced? What are the types of challenges? Like, are there more towards the networking or like, or the API calls, or like where was the difficulty?
I would say since the project was really open-ended, I read about multiple project plans that had strict plannings and task lists of what to do and not to do. I was familiar with Cacti, so Cacti itself was not difficult for me. But the most difficult part about this project was setting up and defining the goals, requirements, and designing the solution itself, rather than on implementation. I would say in Cacti, you would spend maybe a few weeks getting started, getting everything running, getting acquainted with the code base, etc. But after that is really simple, and you start to see the framework and this plugin module really paying off and being easy to work with.
Okay, thank you. That's really good. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm hoping if I could get to see this the presentation. Are you going to share the a link or something for this or
No, yeah, I believe the recording will be available, and I will also send the slides to David, so I'll probably forward them to everyone who signed up for the meeting. So
Yeah. Yeah, if you signed up for the meetup, I will send an email, and I'll also put it on the description of the video on YouTube, so that the recording will be on our YouTube channel, and I'll put a link to the slides there too.
yeah, I was thinking actually to also add to the PowerPoints just some simple links for the actual work, so it would be easier to find them on both on Cacti and also online for documentation, etc. So I'll do that for submitting the slide.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Okay, sounds like not. Again, if anybody has any more information that they want to learn about Cacti, or if you have questions later, you're always welcome to join us in the community. You know, this is not your only chance to get involved with Cacti, so please join us on the LF Decentralized Trust Discord server or join one of the Cacti calls, and we hope to see you again. So thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you for the
Thanks, Eduardo.
opportunity and for joining.
All right, bye all.
Bye.